You never really know who your family is until you have nothing left to offer them. I still remember the click of the front door behind me. That sound, so familiar, turned foreign in a second. I had just lost my job. 12 years of early mornings, skipped vacations, and building a future one spreadsheet at a time, gone in a single meeting. I didn't even argue. I packed up a cardboard box, nodded to the receptionist on the way out, and walked straight to my sister's house. I told myself they'd understand, that they'd rally around me. I wasn't asking for money, just a place to think. A hug. Maybe someone to say, "You've done enough for now. Let us carry you a little." Instead, I walked into a room full of smiles until they saw me. "Oh," my sister said, wine glass half raised. "I thought you'd be busy. Looking for jobs or something?" I laughed, trying to play it off. "I will. Just needed to catch my breath." "You've been catching your breath your whole life," she muttered. My mom didn't defend me. My dad looked past me like I was part of the wallpaper. The silence stretched thin. And then it happened. Later that evening, while I stood quietly by the patio door, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. My sister, loud and unfiltered as always, raised her glass and said, finally cutting the dead weight, "One less burden to carry." Laughter followed. Real, full laughter. My mother clinked glasses with her. I stood frozen in the hallway. They had thrown a party. Not for support. For relief. I left without saying goodbye. Just walked out. No coat, no keys, nothing. I couldn't feel the cold anyway. All I felt was something shifting inside me, slowly, like tectonic plates grinding under the surface. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stopped needing them. In that moment, I wasn't their son, their brother, their problem. I was something else now. I didn't know what yet. But I knew this. The next chapter of my life wouldn't have them in it. Rock bottom doesn't echo, it absorbs you whole. The place I ended up in was barely more than a room. A mattress on the floor, a leaky faucet, and a single window facing a brick wall. But it was mine. The rent was cheap enough to pay in cash. No questions asked. The first few weeks, I barely spoke to anyone. I took up jobs, cleaning, delivering food, moving boxes. Anything that kept me out of the house and away from my thoughts. I deleted every contact I had from my old life. No one noticed. That silence cut deep at first. Then, it became clarity. I kept a notebook by the bed. Every night, I wrote something in it. Not poems. Not plans. Just thoughts. Fragments of a voice I hadn't listened to in years. I remembered I liked to build things. Digital things. I dusted off my old laptop, barely working, chipped corner, battery fried, and began tinkering again. A website. Nothing fancy. Just a space for local freelancers to find each other. Then another. A landing page for a handyman I met on a job. He couldn't afford a designer, so I offered to help for free. He brought me 3 more clients. I didn't announce anything. No press, no social media. Just steady, quiet work. One site turned into 5. Then 10. Then someone offered me money to build a simple portal for their small logistics firm. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every line of code felt like a brick in a foundation no one could take from me. I didn't have a car. I walked or took the bus. I didn't go out drinking or spend weekends in bars. Every dollar went back into my tools, my skills. While others posted highlight reels online, I stayed in the shadows, growing, learning, building. There were nights I stared at the ceiling, fist clenched, wondering if it would ever amount to anything. But then I'd remember that hallway, that toast, that moment they decided I was disposable. And it would push me a little further. This wasn't revenge. This was resurrection. When you stop trying to prove yourself, that's when you become undeniable. 3 years passed. The room with the leaky faucet was long behind me. I now lived in a small loft above an old bookstore. Not flashy, not loud, but enough. I had a team. A real one. Remote developers, designers, content folks. People who believed in the work because it worked. We weren't trying to change the world. We were helping people keep their businesses alive, make a living, feel seen. We didn't pitch ourselves. Word of mouth did the work. One day, a tech blog wrote about us. Nothing major, just a 2-paragraph mention. But the phone started ringing after that. Steady, then louder. We learned to say no. That's when I realized we were really growing. My name didn't need to be in the headlines. I liked it that way. And then, something happened. I saw an old article about my family's business. The store. The one they always treated like a crown jewel. It was struggling. Deeply. Online competition, bad management, debt. They were trying to stay afloat, but time was running out. And the building they operated from, the one my grandfather had bought decades ago, was quietly listed for sale. They had no idea I saw it. I made one call, then another. Everything went through a trust, then a third-party holding. No breadcrumbs. No signature they'd recognize. In less than 2 months, I owned the property. I didn't feel proud. I felt, still, not triumphant, not vindicated. Just free. I walked by the building the day the papers were signed. Same cracked sidewalk. Same tired signage. I stood across the street and watched as the staff locked up for the night. I wasn't there for revenge. I didn't want to tear anything down. But I wasn't going to stand in the shadow of that place anymore. The city skyline flickered to life behind me, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled, not because I had won anything, but because I had reclaimed something. Me. Power doesn't always raise its voice, sometimes. It just doesn't answer the phone. The first email came 3 weeks later. A polite message from the family's lawyer, inquiring about the property's new ownership. I ignored it. Then came the calls, voicemails filled with confusion, concern, then urgency. The lease, apparently, was ending. No renewal option had been provided. I listened to the messages on my phone, one by one, in the quiet of my office. My sister's voice, tight with stress. My father's, clipped and sharp. My mother's, soft, almost trembling. But none of them said my name. Because they still didn't know. They tried to figure it out. Pulled records, asked questions. The holding company shielded everything. I made sure of that. All roads led to dead ends. I didn't respond. They posted about it on social media, cryptic messages about unjust decisions and the end of an era. Friends of the family reached out to me, not realizing I was the one behind it. I didn't correct them. I didn't explain. I owed no one a story. Behind the scenes, I was already drafting plans. Not demolition. Not closure. Transformation. I saw what that space could become if freed from old weight, from ego and tradition. It had bones worth saving, just not the history tied to it. Meanwhile, the family scrambled. Emails turned into letters. Then personal messages from distant cousins, old neighbors. My inbox became a museum of other people's panic. And still, I said nothing. Because silence, I had learned, is not weakness. Sometimes it's the strongest choice you can make. What they were feeling now, this unease, this grasping for control, they had handed to me that night, in a wine-glass toast. I had just returned the gesture. Without a word. Without bitterness. Only balance. Some truths don't need to be shouted. They just need to be heard once, and remembered forever. They finally asked to meet. I agreed. The cafe was neutral ground. Small, quiet, tucked off a side street downtown. I arrived early, ordered black coffee, and sat near the window. The air outside was heavy with summer heat, but inside, everything felt still. My mother arrived first. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on me, and I saw the hope flicker. Like maybe I was just the son who needed to be reminded of his place. My sister came next, dressed like she was heading to a negotiation. My father followed, last, silent as he sat down. No one touched their drinks. "Why are you doing this?" my mother asked, her voice low. "We're your family." I looked at her. At all of them. "You were." My sister leaned in. "So it's true? You own the building?" I nodded once. Calm. "You're going to kick us out?" she snapped. "No," I said. "The lease is ending." "That's different." My father grunted. "You think this makes you strong?" This little stunt. I met his stare without flinching. I didn't buy that building to make a point. I bought it because I could. And because I no longer have to ask permission to exist. My mother's eyes welled. "You don't understand what this will do to us." I placed my cup down gently. "I understand perfectly. I remember what it did to me." They had no words for that. There was no shouting. No dramatic walkout. Just silence, thick and final. I stood to leave. I'm not here to destroy anything. But I'm not here to save it either. And then I walked out, the door closing behind me with the same soft click I remembered from that night all those years ago. But this time, it wasn't an ending. It was the first real beginning. The best way to reclaim your story is to write a new one in the same space they tried to erase you. 6 months later, the lights came back on in the building. But they weren't fluorescent, flickering office lights. These were warm, soft, deliberate. The kind that made people feel welcome when they walked through the door. The ground floor became an open co-working hub, but not for suits or startups with too much seed money. It was for the ones who reminded me of who I was 3 years ago. People building something from nothing. Barbers with side hustles. Coders working 2 jobs. Local artists who had always been told to get serious. Now they had desks, meeting rooms, fast Wi-Fi, fresh coffee. The second floor? Free workshops, financial literacy, basic tech skills, resume clinics. Staffed by volunteers from the community, and later, some of the same people who once rented desks downstairs. I named the space quietly, not after myself. No brand tied to my face. Just a name that meant something to me. A word from an old journal entry, back in that one-room apartment, when all I had was belief and nowhere to put it. People started talking. Articles came out. Photos. My team expanded. We took on mentorship projects, helped others launch their own community spaces. And I walked those halls daily. Not as a symbol, not as a boss, just as someone who knew what it meant to be ignored and wanted to make sure fewer people ever felt that way again. I heard, indirectly, that the old family business folded completely. My sister tried launching something else. My father quietly retired. My mother stopped attending social events. They moved on, but never upward. And I didn't gloat. I didn't stop to look back. Because I was building something worth more than pride. I was building a place where no one had to earn their worth the hard way. Where nobody toasted to someone else's downfall. It wasn't revenge. It was replacement. Sometimes the greatest peace comes not from winning, but from no longer needing the war. They don't call anymore. At first, the silence was jarring, like something was missing. But I realized quickly, what was gone wasn't family. It was the echo of needing their approval. Some relatives reached out. Distant cousins, old family friends. Some asked questions they didn't have the right to ask. Others passed judgment in carefully worded messages, thinly disguised as concern. I didn't respond. I wasn't hiding. I just wasn't explaining myself anymore. The new space continued to grow. We expanded to neighboring cities. Brought in new leaders, new ideas. I saw a former dishwasher launch a food startup in our kitchen incubator. I watched a woman who'd once worked 3 retail jobs teach her first coding class. I sat in the back and listened, unnoticed, smiling to myself. This wasn't just a building anymore. It was a living thing. Breathing, evolving, quietly breaking cycles. And me? I woke up every day without fear. Without the weight of wondering if I was good enough. I didn't chase approval. I didn't seek applause. I had a quiet apartment, a good dog, a shelf of well-worn books. My calendar was full, but not loud. My life was mine. The past didn't haunt me. It just faded. Not forgiven. Not forgotten. Just irrelevant. People love stories where the hero gets revenge. Where the tables turn, and those who laughed end up begging. But this wasn't about revenge. This was about release. They took me for granted. Laughed at my weakness. Toasted to my disappearance. And now I'm free.